While playing League of Legends, players might feel like some champions are broken, others overpowered, and, unfortunately, a few may be a mix of both. In this series, we've covered basically all the ways that you can describe champions, from broken to overpowered, and conversely, underpowered. Of course, we've also covered Lee Sin, one of League of Legends' most popular champions, and what makes all of the players, fans, and pros love him the way that they do. Naturally, there's only going to be one type of champion left to cover, the ones who are of a different breed, those champions that are much more rare on Summoner's Rift, champions that, well, no one plays. These champs are generally underpowered, unpopular, and maybe even a bit boring, as sad as that is. Of all of the champions that are at the bottom of the least played category, none of them define what it means to be underplayed the same way that this guy does, Ivern. Ever since his release, he is arguably the least played champion we've ever seen. Some champions in the game's history were underutilized, like how the old Galio was really only good against heavy magic damage teams, keeping him far too niche to really see consistent play. Others weren't strong for a very long time, like how the old Urgot only saw a few months of viability amidst years of being a bad pick. But truthfully, it doesn't really feel as if Ivern is so bad that he can't even be played. It's just that nobody likes him. No one cares about Ivern, and even when he's strong in the meta, or at least could be a pretty good situational pick, no one plays him. Which is not only sad, but also makes for an incredibly interesting story. This is League of Legends' least popular champion, named Ivern.
Gets us an interesting gameplay position that we can put him in, which is a support classed character in the jungle position. And so normally they have all their, supports have all their limitations in terms of damage and what they can do, but we basically get around it with this.
Yeah,
so.
well, you bring up support jungler, and I think it's interesting because we've often heard support jungler, as like this faux class that people like to think of, where they're like, Nunu's a support jungler, and it's like, what does he do that's supportive? Well, he eats shit out of the enemy jungle and
blood boils.
And then hits them a bunch, and they don't get to play the game. I was like, okay, well that doesn't. All right, but I mean, I guess it's a support relative to like a Master Yi, but some of these characters that people have felt are support junglers, I think, don't really live up to what you may expect out of that theme.
Right. I mean, we wouldn't specifically classify them as a support jungler and say that they fulfill like that niche.
Right.
Ivern's story was interesting from the moment that he was announced, not only because he's a new champion, which we all love to see, but also because of the nature of his release. Ivern's design was specifically tailored at being a brand new type of champion, a true support jungler. Over the years, Riot has tried to do what they can to shake up the jungle role. Kindred's release was a huge step for the game, as they were designed to be the main ranged carry jungler, a marksman, a role that is typically reserved for the bottom lane. To actually be in the jungle was a new and fresh idea, and people loved it. And in the case of Ivern, he wasn't any different. This idea was super solid from Riot, and it's true. When looking at the roster of junglers, there aren't any real supports that can go jungle. We use this term in-game about the supportive jungler, a name that is usually tagged on champions like Nunu and Sejuani, but this is a bit misleading. Sure, these champions are supportive, but they are not supports. They are not innately peeling champions. They are not enchanters, and in fact, they're a totally different class. They are tanks. Their goal and their gameplay is designed to be more helpful to your team than a true carry like Kha'Zix or Rengar, but to say that League of Legends didn't have a support jungler was completely true. Thus, the Greenfather was born. I really thought that going back to his release would help give us a clue on why his popularity really never took off, and in the literal sense, I was genuinely curious if he was not seen too much at first. However, this doesn't seem to be the case. Ivern's Champion Spotlight has 3 million views, and Magikarp's actual Champion Spotlight has nearly 4 million, which relative to the rest of the champions in the game, that's fairly normal. At least in terms of the initial numbers, he didn't necessarily get off to a slow start. In fact, Ivern's story started out very strong. Ivern was released at the end of Season 6, and at first, he wasn't that good. He would end up being buffed quite a bit and would receive a few changes fixing some of his core problems like buffing his Q cooldown by 2 seconds at all ranks, adding a nice quality of life buff that lets you press QQ if it hits to instantly fly Ivern to the target, as well as Daisy receiving a maximum health buff and a bug fix for her. This is something that we will get to more later on, I promise. After Ivern was directly buffed, the jungle for Season 7 only a few weeks later was also changed. We had the introduction of the new jungle plants, we saw smite changes, the small camp spawn timers and experience changes, updates to the camps themselves, and the introduction of a new support item called Redemption. The crazy thing was how quick the turnaround was for Ivern. A few weeks before all of these changes, he was clearly terrible. But because of all of the changes for Season 7, he then quickly became the strongest champion in the game. Nearly every single one of those jungle changes were beneficial for Ivern, such as all of the camps that you smited healing you now instead of just the red buff, as well as Redemption being added, Locket having its shield doubled, and the Honey Fruit allowing Ivern to have a healthier clear since he has no built-in sustain. He would easily take over the competitive scene. His new setup pretty much only rivaled the heights of Janna during the Ardent Censor meta, as he became arguably the best enchanter that we've ever seen. Only a month after the original buffs and Season 7 release, Ivern would be nerfed twice, on the same patch. Patch 6.24 saw Ivern receive a direct nerf in the normal patch notes, and turns out he was still too strong, so he would be hotfix nerfed again later that week. On patch 7.3, Daisy was nerfed and, well, had some bug fixes. One thing that Ivern used to be able to do was hide epic monsters like Baron and Dragon with literally just one bush, making him an incredibly strong pick in competitive. On patch 7.8, he was no longer able to hide Baron and Dragon with just one bush, now requiring walls of bushes, which was necessary, sure, because it was broken, but still a huge nerf. On 7.10, his jungle clear was nerfed, making his weak early game even weaker and his biggest weakness more exemplified. On 7.12, his base damage was reduced on his E, and then finally on patch 7.14, the cast range on his brush was halved. These are a lot of nerfs. Over the years, I've done quite a bit of research into League of Legends champions while making these videos, and it's pretty rare that you see this many consistent, consecutive nerfs. Once a month, for almost a full year, Ivern was nerfed. And that's gonna hurt a champion a lot. For any champion, even a popular one like Lee Sin or Yasuo, it would be very hard to recover from months and months of being gutted. There have been plenty of times where champions like Yasuo, Vayne, Thresh, and Lux have been bad, but these champions almost always work their way back into the meta because they are played so much. However, what would happen to a champion that wasn't all that liked? One that wasn't very popular and was only played because he might have been the #1 most OP champion in the entire game? I think to answer that, we need to take a look at this graph. This graph has to be one of the most damning things that I could find that sums up Ivern's story. This is Ivern's ban rate history. On his release, you can see that he wasn't banned too much because he was pretty bad. He would then receive a few buffs and the jungle would be changed, and all of a sudden, he was OP. He would reach a peak at around a 22% ban rate. He would be nerfed and some support items were changed, but then people kept playing him and got better at him, causing another huge spike, this time peaking higher at around a 26% ban rate. Riot would continue to cut down the tree, as we saw before, with nerf after nerf after nerf, and then his ban rate dropped to nearly 0. Once it hit this low, the question would then be, how long would it stay there? Would players get better at him once again and we would see a small spike? Would it go back up in just a couple months? Well, Ivern was overpowered at the beginning of Season 7 and was a relevant and strong champion both in solo queue and competitive play until around the summer of 2017. Now we're almost at the end of 2019, about to be Season 10, and Ivern has literally never recovered. You are looking at a champion who hasn't been relevant for almost 3 years. Let's be real, not every champion will be the most popular in the game's history. People just have preferences on the things that they like. Some like different archetypes and themes of characters. Edgy swordsmen and blade wielders like Kayn and Yasuo play out very differently than Lux does, who is a more happy-toned light mage, which also extends to their theme, not just the gameplay. However, certain champions are predictably smash hits with the community. If Vayne was already a popular and loved champion, then the huge release of Kai'Sa should come as no surprise that she would reach the top of the play rate charts. Their kits are similar enough in the way that they play out, but Kai'Sa has a more modern kit and a complexity that works in her favor, not prohibiting new players from wanting to try her. She also has an evolve mechanic that was already thought to be super cool on another popular champion in Kha'Zix, so carrying over ideas from two popular champions and creating a new one out of them might do pretty well. Point is, I don't think many devs, and specifically the ones that design Kai'Sa, are all that surprised to know that she is one of their most successful releases ever. It's pretty easy to understand why she's sold so many skins and is so loved by the community, but it literally is never the intention of Riot to design champions that aren't going to be played. They never plan on it being that way, because if they knew that a champion won't be played too much, why would they ever waste their time designing them? Unfortunately though, it's just going to happen that way sometimes. It's possible to blame the theme, the idea, or the core concept, but for Ivern specifically, I'm not satisfied with saying that his core concept is bad and that's the reason why he's not played. I don't think because he's not a Wind Bladesman or a Blind Monk is the exact reason that you're not seeing him. I totally get that I'm being quite biased, but personally, I think a Druidic, Woodland, Greenfather, or even Elven type character is my favorite theme in the entire fantasy genre. If you ever played EverQuest, do you remember the Woodlands and the Oak Mist Forest? What about Greater Feydark and the city of Kelethin, with those massive trees where the fairies, the elves, and all the gnomes live? That has to be my favorite area in the entire game. I remember as a kid being very impressed by the visuals of this place and falling in love with it. For Runescape, the lost city of Xanaris where the fairies live was a huge reveal in that game's quest line, which is probably one of the most memorable places for those who played Runescape. What about the Elven lands out west with the city of Prifendos? These were massive releases. This is easily one of the nicest looking zones graphically, and the Elven music of RuneScape 3 after they remastered the game's soundtrack is hauntingly beautiful. Finally, you can't leave out the Elven Forest either on WoW, as it's one of the best starting areas in any video game, period. For anyone playing human and starting new on WoW, this was the first area you were dropped into, and it blew people away. In League, even though there aren't a lot of characters with this theme, the ones that do have it I think are really cool. I personally think the Elderwood skins are the best skins in the game, period. I know I'm being biased, but I love them. Ever since TFT updated with the new Rise of the Elements, Druids and Woodland characters are in there, and it's a pretty nice comp to run. I love that these champions are in the pack. On top of being cool, it's a pretty effective comp, especially early game, and of course, Ivern's in there too. The point of this entire section is that I think there's nothing wrong with what Ivern is trying to be, and what his theme is supposed to be, and has a lot more to do with how it's given to us. His theme is beloved by many players, and fans of the fantasy genre, including me. I believe there would be a lot more players that would like Ivern even if his kit was different. Inherently, this concept of the Enchanter Druid Woodland character is not flawed. However, it is the class implementation of the support into the jungle itself, which is a huge problem. Ivern's execution and the kit that he has is fundamentally flawed, and has obviously, well, clearly missed the mark with the player base. By far, without a doubt in my mind, Ivern has two distinct abilities that ruin the champion for most players and the junglers that try him out, that being his passive and his ultimate. I spoke to a good friend of mine named June, who is a challenger player and the lead writer at Pro Guides. When asking him about some thoughts on Ivern, he pointed out to me something that was pretty interesting and stuck quite a bit. It's not that Ivern doesn't do damage or doesn't get a lot of flashy kills, because, again, neither do the rest of the enchanters. It's more in the way that his kit specifically plays out, and the fact that being in the jungle causes Riot and the design team who made him to have to make a few sacrifices. In general, in League of Legends, it's just satisfying to kill things and deal damage, even when you're 0-10 on Yasuo, and trust me, I play Yasuo and I've been 0-10 at least a million times because I'm a feeder. Even still, it's just fun as heck to press EQ and do your spin. Something about dashing all over the place and killing minions in jungle camps makes you forget about the flame in the chat and your teammates telling you unspeakable things. It's a form of escapism within the game. Unfortunately, while playing Ivern, you're kind of stuck being everybody's best friend, who is supposed to be a happy-go-lucky champion with a great attitude, who doesn't kill anything, damage anything, and is just here to be a supportive addition to the team who can't carry on his own, but he can make everyone around him a better player and a better person. In one of the most toxic environments in all of online gaming, which isn't a good mix. Playing Ivern feels like your level of fun and your teammates' level of fun too is almost completely reliant on the state of the game. When things are going well and you're winning, nobody cares that you locked in Ivern. Everybody's happy, and it's always, oh wow, okay, Ivern's kinda OP guys, just kidding, he's viable. But if you lose, Ivern's the worst champion ever. This jungler is terrible. Ivern's a troll pick. Ivern sucks. Never play it again in my game. When making this video, I reached out to the Redditors on Ivern mains to see what they had to say about him and what kind of input that I could get. I left a few questions to help make sure I knew how they felt too, and what their perspective is coming from somebody who mains him. The previous point is something that I really wanted to know. In the Reddit post, I asked about the idea if the Ivern mains have a problem with how unpopular he is, and if they run into problems with toxicity, and their answers really do make you feel bad for them. These guys are just trying to play their favorite champion in one of their favorite video games, a character that they just enjoy playing, and sometimes you can't even make it through champion select because your team purposefully bans your one trick, since Ivern stinks, dude. The other problem that the Reddit spoke heavily on is one that is very known by the League community and has been for years, not just the Ivern mains, which is Daisy. Daisy might be the worst ultimate in the game, at least to a few points. Daisy is so buggy, and she's literally received countless bug fixes in the patch notes. She's starting to rival Azir with how many bug fixes are needed to make her functional. She is the hardest pet in the game to control, far worse than Tibbers is for Annie. She is clunky, unintuitive, and a straight up nightmare for most players. Completely new Ivern players not only misuse Daisy itself, but are even scared to try due to the horrific spaghetti code that you're forced to interact with. One thing I do know is that Riot does actually care that Ivern is like this. Don't get me wrong. Riot's not a perfect company, they don't make zero mistakes, and they clearly do balance around the most popular champions and the ones that sell the most skins. But by that logic, if you want to play the greedy developer card, it should still be important to them that Ivern gets some love, because a champion that sells almost no skins is therefore a useless champion. Recently, we saw them try to make a change that helps newer Ivern players and lowers his skill floor, which is now that he's permanently ranged. I know a lot of the one tricks don't like this change. In fact, they've told me that they hate it. But looking at it from the perspective of someone who's brand new to Ivern, this really eliminates an annoying variable. It was already hard enough to learn his jungle pathing, micromanaging a buggy Daisy, learning to not get invaded, learning to invade yourself, peeling for your team, hitting your Q which flies super slow, and getting through the early game. The fact that you're now permanently ranged does help your early game red buff ganks, and even though the Ivern pros could use his bushes like it's nothing, it's now one less thing to worry about. It can be hard for one tricks to give up the parts and the mechanics in the kit that they really like, but you can't just throw accessibility out the window. And in the future, maybe Riot will come up with some more potential changes for Ivern. Despite reaching record low numbers for a champion in his presence, Ivern is still a very important champion in the story of League of Legends. He's a jungler that isn't normal, but that's not a bad thing. He's the only true supportive champion that doesn't play in the bottom lane. He's the only jungler of his type, and that makes him unforgettable. My hope is that Riot knows he's not a total waste of a champion and could just use some more love, and is definitely a little bit misunderstood. Guys, we're almost at 200k subscribers, so if you're not already subscribed, I would really appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much for watching, leave a like, and I will see you all next time.